Umpasatani, father of sablefish, expressing appreciation for the privilege of gathering in traditional territory. I'm wondering whether your coalition is fully supportive of the ALR. I heard one or two, shall I say, guarded references to that. I have a quarrel with a phrase and also with a term. I have a quarrel with the phrase 3 levels of government. I'd like you to emulate Iona Campanola and say 4 orders of government and include Aboriginal. And I also have a quarrel with the term non-profit. I don't like it. I think it's as bad as density or even worse. And I'd like us to, although people have told me that non-profit is enshrined in legislation, I'd like it to be replaced by the phrase community profit. I think that would send a more positive and accurate signal. So I'd like to know if you have an interest in involving Aboriginal entities both locally and nationally. I think that would be beneficial to you. There are perhaps somewhere around 100,000 urban Aboriginal people in this metropolitan area, and I think that it would benefit your coalition to be seen to have significant Aboriginal inclusion.
Thank you, Don. Maureen?
I will respond first. First of all, I fully acknowledge, and I think we will acknowledge the need to be inclusive, and we would welcome participation of First Nations. I think in terms of, you know, how to engage, maybe you can come up to us after and share with us some ideas and thoughts. You know, this whole process is about inclusivity, not exclusivity. And so you're an important, integral part of our vibrant community here. And we weren't meant to, I apologize if it comes as if we were being exclusive, and that wasn't the intent. In terms of the term nonprofit, it is in legislation. You know, it's a nice idea to, you know, to talk about the community benefits. Again, that gets to this whole point that housing is integral to the well-being of a community, and maybe we do need some paradigm shifts in language here. I don't know, Wayne?
Well, I think first of all, the First Nations are included in everything that we're doing now from a municipal and a Metro Vancouver area. And you know, one of the things that's of interest when I hear you speak is that the First Nations have great pieces of property and land. So we do need you. We need you to come and be with us, and let's see how we can use it collectively for everyone to bring us together. I think that would be a very positive step for all of us to take.
Thanks, Wayne. And I think Bruce, Michael Geller?
First of all, I can highly recommend some very good reading relating to rental housing in the Lower Mainland, and that's a series of studies that were recently released by the City of Vancouver, and they're available on the website. There's a consolidated report by Dale McClanahan, which, although there's some numbers I question, overall it's an excellent survey of the current state of rental housing. And then there are 6 supporting studies. Everything from looking at the economics of building condos that are rented out to the operation of older rental housing projects and how much money needs to be spent if we're going to try and bring them up. So they're on the City of Vancouver website. I've also linked to them on my website. You know, I don't think any of us disagree with what we've heard this morning, but sometimes we do want to try and find some quick fixes. So I'd like to offer 2 quick fixes. The first one is we're running out of land, but the truth is we're really not making a very good use of the land we've already got. And I think one of the greatest opportunity rests with all the parking lots around the Lower Mainland. And one of the best ways to encourage the redevelopment of parking lots is to review and change our parking regulations, both for new development, but even for some of that existing development. And as long as we have municipalities setting minimum parking standards, rather than setting maximum parking standards, we have a problem. And so my first recommendation to Wayne and his colleagues is to take all of your minimum parking standards and overnight, at the next council meeting, make them your maximum parking standards. And that in itself will significantly reduce the cost of building smaller rental units. The other thing, and I know this won't be too popular with some of you, but one way of increasing the supply of family rental housing, which is where I think we have the most severe shortage, is for the nonprofits and the co-ops and the municipal housing corporations to take a look at who's living in the 2 and 3 bedroom units under your purview. Because unfortunately, we're all very benevolent, and we're afraid to tell that widow whose husband has died and whose children have left that she can no longer live in that 3 bedroom unit. But in the overall interest, in the overall community interest, we need to start slowly reallocating who's living in our existing stock. Because as we saw up there, there's a significant amount of social housing in the region. And from my experience as the former program manager of social housing at CMHC, we had problems in the 70s with the allocation, and it's far more severe today. And overnight, or in a relatively short period of time, we could start to create a lot more rental housing simply by reallocating what we've got than all of the other incentives. Those are some suggestions for this morning.
Well, thank you very much for that, because in actual fact, that's what we're doing with Metro Vancouver Housing. We've looked at it, and we've through Don Littleford and his crew, we've said, okay, let's very slowly increase what some of the people are paying, because some of them haven't been paying their fair share, quite frankly. So it's not very popular, but we're going to do it. And the same with the people who are living in 3 bedroom units that could move into a 1 bedroom. We're doing that. Not popular, but we are doing it. So we are doing exactly what you're saying. As far as the parking lots, I agree with you. I'll have to take a look and see what we can do.
Gosh, Wayne, I really like you. It's very progressive.
Sorry, because I actually have to take a breath in this placement. Like, this is a 20-year debate that's been going on, is whether or not density is the answer. And density has been suggested for 20 years and hasn't gotten us where we're going. But I'm not saying it may not be part of the answer, but there are a lot of other answers that I'm Leslie Stern, and I'm the project coordinator for the Lower Mainland Network for Affordable Housing. And it seems to be my life has been the personal is political. The network's been sort of on hold because I do it on the side of my desk, and I was recently reno-evicted myself from affordable housing, and I also represent people who have lived in rental housing for a long time and women's housing. And your answer is to do more displacement. I think what we really need to do is look at people who are living in our neighborhood and look at the demographics of our neighborhood. And I want to let you know that the Lower Mainland Network for Affordable Housing, which is a network, and there's a whole bunch of people in this room who I know from the network, is ready and willing to keep meeting and having a roundtable dialogue, which is what we did. We used to have Metro Vancouver around the table, and BC Housing around the table, and Terra Housing around the table, and Entre Nous Femmes Housing Society. So we'd like to get that going again. We'll do that with your support. You know, we can meet by the end of the month, and definitely by next month. So maybe we can keep. I'm really moved and motivated by the fact that you are now seeing it from the perspective of the person and how housing affects people. And so I think that's what we really need to do, is having more dialogues with neighborhoods, really listening what people in neighborhoods have to say, how they vision where they live, because that's really where the answer is, and how we vision our community and how we make our environments work, and that's our road to sustainability. So I really welcome the dialogue, and I'm looking forward to continuing it further. I don't know if you have any reflection, if you've looked at anything else besides density and smaller units as the answer to affordable housing. I'm really encouraged by, and I'm sorry to go on so long, I'm really quite excited by some of the potential here. I'm really encouraged by your endorsement of reinvesting in the nonprofit sector. Our website will be reactivated. All we need is a little bit of very small input for reinvigoration. So I welcome this. Thank you.
Maybe I'll just, is this on? Can you hear me okay? It's not just about density, but when we're talking about increasing supply, we have to talk about density because we don't have a lot of other choices. So we need to bring more units on. And density in this region is reflective of the fact we have a very small land availability, land supply available to us. So we have to use the land we have more efficiently, and that's where the term density comes from. But you're right, it's not just that. There's lots and lots of things that have to be looked at. It's a complex issue because we are a complex society. We have different needs and different desires as people living here. And what we are trying to do is to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to access good quality, affordable housing, rental, ownership, or otherwise. There's a gentleman back there.
Yeah, I think Garth.
First of all, Burnaby's done a pretty good job with densification around all the SkyTrain stations now. There's high density development taking place. It's market development mostly, but it's still relatively affordable. Also, Michael made a comment about overhousing, and I am a lawyer and act for a lot of nonprofit societies, and many of them have addressed this problem. It's difficult to move people out who are overhoused, but a number of them have done so and are determined to continue to do so. I had two questions, one for Wayne. You talked about cities providing land. Do you mean nominal rental land and long-term rental? And the other question is for both of you, respecting the new Premier designate Christy Clark's statements that she's going to concentrate on families. Have you any indication what that means respecting housing? Because there hasn't been any low-income family housing built for at least 10 years. Do you think that there will be a shift in emphasis with the provincial housing ministry? Thank you.
First of all, the land situation in every city is different. Our city has been built up for 150 years, so we don't have a lot of land available. However, what we do have is land that's already in the housing that is now substandard. And instead of being at the 1 level or 2 level suites, we can put them up to 6 level with the new building codes. Now that should give us some more, quote, density, but also through proper planning, we should have a nice lifestyle for many people. So where there's 50 units now, there may be 100 units tomorrow, but some of those have to go back into rental as well as market housing. As far as what the government's going to do now, it's our job to talk with Mrs. Clark and make sure that she knows the necessities that we have. I'm very pleased to see that she said family first, because that's where we're all coming from. So our city will be on that.
Yeah.
I think it's too soon, really, for, I think our caucus met yesterday for the first time, so we don't know who's doing what yet.
So I think that's an excellent opportunity for us to give her some suggestions, quite frankly. And I think that's what we will be doing. I was listening to a talk show the other day, and they were asking the questions, what does Christy Clark mean when she says families first? And what was really telling was the number of people who called in who hoped they knew what she meant. And one was a lady who had been a nurse, and she had lost her job several years before, was through some downsizing. She was a single mom. She had, I think it was a 15-year-old and a 9-year-old, and the job she currently had was paying her $11 an hour. She was trying to go to school to learn a new trade. She wanted to become, she thought she might like to become an electrician. But, you know, it was very poignant, her story. She worked full-time. She was raising children, and she said, you know what tore her heart apart was that she had to decide whether they were going to have a good meal or whether her kids would be able to participate in school sports or something else. So I hope that when Christy Clark is looking at families first, she is actually considering the strain that is on families. When we have expensive housing, people have to make some very difficult choices, and those choices really reduce the quality of life for a family over the long run if we do not provide them with adequate, safe, and affordable shelter. So I think it's up to all of us to tell her this is where we think she should concentrate.
Thanks, Maureen and Wayne. Gordon?
Maureen, could you repeat your back to the 70s agenda for the federal government? I think you had about 3 specifics there.
Oh, sure. And these are, I mean, one is the ability to offset rental losses against other income. One is the, let me just go to my page here. The other one is the rollover of capital gains. So that means if you own rental and you sell it, you pay capital gains on that sale, on that profit. But if you reinvest in new rental, we think you should be able to roll over, so you don't have to pay the capital gains. That's a very important one. Yeah. Like every, okay, thank you, Mark. Like every, yeah, like every other you know what? Here's a funny thing. This always gets me. This is not the first time an effort's been made in this country to change federal tax policy. It's been going on for some time. But the reason we haven't been successful, this is my personal opinion, is that we haven't had a housing policy in this country. And because we haven't had a housing policy, they're not looking at housing as a priority, and it's become sort of a tax policy. When the guys in finance look at housing, they look at inputs, outputs, and they look at it purely from a financial perspective. Can the government make money? You know, how does this, bear up against other things? So they often say to us, well, if we do it for you, we'll have to do it for everyone else. The trouble is they did it to us in the mid-1970s. They took away some of these abilities to write off expenses, making it viable. So they actually, what we're asking them to do is to solve the problem they actually created in the mid-1970s by eliminating the MERD program. So that is, that's my personal, I shouldn't talk about it, but that's what I think.
Just make a comment on that.
So there's a number of issues. The other one I think we need to consider is the impact of the GST, now HST, on rental housing, and zero rated, or the ability to or eliminate it on rental housing. That is a big one. We've increased costs to landlords through the HST with no ability to pass it on. Maybe a good thing in order to keep rents under control. However, it's making less and less attractive and making it more difficult for landlords to be in the business. And when you have high costs, one of the reasons we have an aging stock, to renovate is very expensive to many of these buildings. And, things get to a point where they're so deteriorated, it becomes inadequate shelter. If we had tax policies that included a renovation tax credit or some type of credit so people could maintain those properties more regularly and not leave them to the last minute, perhaps that would help. There's a few other things that I can actually give you later, Gordon, that has been more broadly supported. But tax policy, capital gains, I think are big ones. The deductibility, ability to deduct sub-costs and losses against other income. Those are things that really, from an investor's perspective, are key.
These are basically tax expenditures, as the accountants would phrase it. In other words, there would be a loss of revenue, tax revenue to the federal government, and I presume that's where the resistance comes.
Well, and that's right, and that goes back to my point. That loss of revenue is, I think, short-term thinking, because when you're creating more rental housing, where every $1 million investment, that's 12 jobs. You're creating shelter and healthy families.
Yeah, we get that, I think, but can I just add the political spin on this? It seems to me that and I'll be ideological about it, it seems to me the right has established just a profoundly effective meme frame for this. Tax cuts are good. End of discussion. Right? Don't have to debate policy. Tax cuts are good, and getting the money out the door in a generalized tax cut is going to get you elected. I don't think there's any doubt that that's worked. Really, what you're proposing is tax cuts for housing, but you're framing it as though it sounds like in complicated terms, stuff that people just kind of glaze over at. I think you just got to simplify it down. You want tax cuts.
Okay.
And you want tax cuts for housing.
Cuts.
I think you got to frame it in a way that the politicians get it, and what they get is tax cuts, tax cuts, tax cuts. And if they can get the money out the door without having to get into any of this stuff, that's what they do first. Then they've got a problem with tax revenues, and so they have to make cuts in policy. And that's where you get screwed. So I think you got to go where they are and say, look, what we're really arguing here is tax cuts, and there's going to be a big social benefit from it.
Thanks, Gordon. I mean, actually, when Judy Segro had the Royal Commission looking at this issue a number of years ago, she came out with this is the government's own commission. They came out with exactly the same recommendations. And within their own government caucus, they didn't get much support. It's really, it's mystifying how at one point in our history we realized how important housing was, and we did everything to generate more housing. If you've got good quality housing, it stabilizes your economy, it stabilizes society. But
That's seen as the ideology of the left.
you know, I wouldn't consider myself necessarily on the left. I mean, this is this is good economics. Anyway.
No, that's right. Again, the most important issue, this is for all Canadians. This isn't for one little segment. This is for everybody. It's time for us to look and let's say we want to live a certain lifestyle in this country. We want our children to grow up and have a home that they can be proud of, bring their friends back, and they can concentrate on going to school. Okay. We also want people to be able to eat properly. Okay, and not spend all their money on a subservient place. Okay. Well, it's a lifestyle I think that Canadians should have. I mean, we're a very fortunate country, okay?
But we take your point. If we have to just simply say we want tax cuts, directed. These are directed. I thought I would call them very strategic, and it's just giving us you know, creating rental housing, giving it the same sort of treatment as other sectors of the economy.